Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review, and this review is going to be for the third and final installment of the trilogy I am reviewing, and thank God it's the final one. Because we'll see what we're going to find out why I'm glad it is in a little bit, because speaking of that, not only is this the final one, this one is also probably the worst of the trilogy, and that would have to be for The Hangover Part 3. Yeah. The one that basically doesn't feel like a comedy and feels more like an angry thriller. Oh, yeah. That was literally it. So, that being said, let's recap this. 2009, a film called The Hangover released. Was acclaimed by critics and audiences. Made 467 million worldwide at the box office. Was very popular among filmgoers and was really heavily talked about that year. So, of course, we all know what that meant. 2 years later, in 2011, we got a rehashed sequel, Hangover Part 2, which was just the first one, set in a different location. That was all it was. And they just ramped up all the vulgar humor and just put it in a much darker place called Bangkok. Was not well received by people and kind of hated by fans of the first one. However, that did not stop it from making money. Because believe it or not, Part 2 ended up making somehow made even more money than the first one with $586 million worldwide. And made $85 million on its opening weekend domestically. So, we all knew because of that, another Hangover sequel and a final one was going to be made. And that was where we got this. This was the time when a franchise has pretty much had its run, and when a franchise should just die at a certain time. Especially a comedy series. For that matter, but what is this whole film about? Oh wait, I'm saying the wrong parts all the time, but... So, this film was released on May 2013. And it was even worse, and everyone thought it was even worse than Part 2. However, this movie doesn't rehash the first two. This one goes on more original plots, which is kind of, guess, a good thing. And does go back to Las Vegas, so those are some good things at least, but like I said, Part 3 is low-key the worst. But the first one's the only good one in this whole trilogy, really, but this one's easily the worst one. And when this one was released in May 2013 in theaters, like I said, it was worse received by critics and audiences, got even worse scores, and still made a decent amount of money at the box office, but very disappointing compared to the first two, and only made back up to 362 million worldwide and only made 112 million domestically, despite having the second best opening weekend for an R-rated comedy of 41 million 3-day weekend and 53 million, I think, for a 5-day weekend. Yeah. And only made back 112 million domestically. Damn. Yep, that's a sign that's a sign this franchise is dead. And no one cares anymore. Alright, what's the film about? Now the proper time to say that. Well, eventually, it's been 2 years, again, since the events in Bangkok. Alan Gardner has yet another mishap when he buys a pet giraffe and gets it immediately killed by trying to drive it under an underpass and getting it decapitated. This gets him in some very deep trouble, so deep that his father ends up having a heart attack and dies in the middle of punishing Alan for never owning up to his mistakes. While at the funeral, the Wolfpack does reunite, and Alan's mom informs him that he has gone off his ADHD medication and is completely out of control. So the four of them stage an intervention and send Alan to the rehab facility in Arizona. On the way there, their car is rammed off the road by a guy named Marshall and his thugs. It turns out that very night 4 years ago when Alan bought roofies on the night of Doug's bachelor party back in 2009, he inadvertently stalled a gold heist worth $42 million. Marshall now wants it back, and has kidnapped Doug in order to send a message to the Wolfpack. Their mutual acquaintance Leslie Chow, who made off with half that gold that very night, has actually escaped from a Thai prison and is headed back to North America. But it appears that only Alan knows the location of where Mr. Chow is headed, and that sends the Wolfpack to Tijuana, Mexico, and then back to Las Vegas. So yeah, that's really the plot of the movie. So my thoughts on this series. First one, loved it, one of my favorite comedies of all time. So hilarious, one of the funniest movies ever. Part 2, just an okay sequel. I think it's better than most people try to claim it is. I think some people are a little hard on it. I don't think it's one of the worst sequels out there. I mean, at least it still has a few laughs, and at least Part 2 still tries to be a comedy, at least. It still has some comedy elements in it, despite being a little darker than the first. But definitely a disappointing sequel, but just disappointing, really, to me, and that's it. Part 3 is absolute garbage. Ugh. Yeah. This is probably the one even I agreed with the critics on. This movie was terrible. Even everyone I know who loved the first one, and the few who did like the second one, even they hated this. Almost everyone I know even said they don't like the third the most. Besides, I don't even get why they even bothered with this movie. It's just so far away from the originality of the first two in this whole trilogy. That seemed to simply exist just to tie up a couple of loose ends that really didn't need to be tied up. Okay, yeah, fine. I admit the second one was a carbon copy of the first movie, but the fact that it was a carbon copy and set in Bangkok and brought out the sleazy nature of Bangkok actually gives it a bit of charm. This movie, there is no charm. This movie feels way too dark and too thriller-like to even be declared funny. Yeah. Because basically, what prevents this movie from even being considered funny? Because, well, Doug gets kidnapped, and the guy kidnapping him threatens to kill him if they don't find Chow, who has stolen a bunch of gold off an American crime lord, and now the Wolfpack are the ones who can get their hands on them. And they seem to be attempting to do it now is just throw the woefully unequipped and inquieted Wolfpack into a scenario that they manage to stumble through once again. But what the thing that set the other two movies apart is they cannot remember a thing and must spend the entire movie piecing their fragmented memories back together, and that's gone because they took that away. So this movie's nothing special. Yeah, fine. It's more original than Part 2, but that doesn't make the movie good, guys. Guys, if more go thinking that makes the movie better than Part 2, it's not. Further, Part 2 seriously pushed the boundaries of what can be considered to be acceptable in a modern movie. I'm not really impressed with what they did, but this film was so much tamer than the other two, and definitely not in a good way. That just made the movie... The fact they made this tamer than the first two just made it so dull, pointless, and it really should just not have been made, period. Especially considering the fact that our very first scene of Alan Garner is him causing the death of a giraffe by driving under the bridge and getting it decapitated and causing a car crash on a freeway and nearly a whole bunch of deaths. And the next scene shows that it's really pissed off his dad to the point where he gets a heart attack and dies while Alan's just listening to his headphones, clearly not caring at all. Wow. That is so funny right there. That is humor. Okay, there is one positive. The one positive of Hangover 3 is that there's at least some attempt at an original story. Not much of an attempt, granted, but a little more imaginative than the rehashed plot of The Hangover Part 2. But yeah, this is an even more dreadful film that just tarnishes the reputation of the perfectly enjoyable original. All the jokes are more extremely thin. And Ed Helms' stew is just even more grating by this point. And then we still got Mr. Chow, who who was such a funny character in the first two, is now probably the most annoying character in this whole film, and is given an unacceptable amount of screen time and literally butchers every second of it. In the other two, his very little screen time made him very funny. Whatever. That's just literally what it is, and okay, maybe people would have liked this a little bit better had they maybe just not called this part 3 and just called it like part 2 instead, but granted it would still suck, but probably would have been a better sequel than just another rehash again, like the last one was. And Stephen Sombley's Hollywood Fastlane says, the perfect ending to an epic comedic trilogy. More like you mean terrible. That just makes me laugh. Sorry, and then even the ending is pointless because around the end, Alan has finally found this girl around Las Vegas. They've got married. They're getting married at the end of it. And there's a good little montage where the times that they walked, when they did those slow motion walks, like montage was actually a pretty nice way to end it. They walk into the wedding and it seems like it's the end of the movie as the credits start to roll, but get this. There's a post-credit scene where they apparently had another drunk, bad, memorable night they have forgotten about, where their hotel room is once again trashed. And this time, Alan's new wife, Phil and Stu all wake up in this hotel room, and apparently, since Stu always has the mishaps happen to him, he apparently now had plastic surgery and got boobs. His underwear, and apparently Alan realized the wedding cake was drugged by Chow, and so Chow appears. And of course the smoker monkey from part 2 also appears, jumps on Stu, and then pretty much it just cuts to black, and that's the end of the series. So yeah, the series just ends with a post-credit scene clearly setting up a sequel we're not going to get, because this is the last one they're doing. So yeah, kind of pointless to have that post-credit scene like that if you're not even going to make a fourth. There's just no way. So that will be left on a cliffhanger for the rest of our lives. Any Hangover fan will pretty much be left trying to wonder what's going to happen next. Something they're never going to get. Alright, but so yeah, the one positive I only have for this movie is that it's a more original plot. It's not rehashed this time, but other than that, this movie is trash. Is a mess. If you really want to watch this series, I only recommend the first one, and if you really are that curious to check out the sequels, I guess just watch part 2 and then just stop, because this movie's not worth it. Trust me. Okay, but alright. And that pretty much wraps up my review for Hangover Part 3, and here's how I will rank it. I am going to give The Hangover 3 a 3 out of 10. Alright, and that's pretty much my review for the whole Hangover trilogy. I just wrapped it up. And you're wondering what I'm going to review next. Well, speaking of that question, I've got something to show you. What I got today. Just grab it. Alright. Because I finally got John Carpenter's The Thing for my fucking collection. Yes! I was out at this mini donuts place, and I stopped by this local shop that I think it's called this little fun shop or whatever, and they had this. Finally got it. Looking for this bad boy for ages. This is one of my favorite sci-fi horror movies of all time. Yes, John Carpenter's The Thing is next. Cannot wait. Gotta rewatch the movie first and then give my review of it. But until then, that'll be your first review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Movie Lover 120.